Got a good question for you regarding oxygen. How does it actually affect the fish and their feeding?
Oh, Joe, I bang on to my students about oxygen. Oxygen is an absolutely key part of a fish's life. We take it for granted. You wake up in the morning, you breathe in fresh air, and it's got a constant, relatively constant, obviously if at altitude the oxygen content drops, but for us, we live in a fairly constant oxygen world. For fish, that isn't the case. And so oxygen in a fishery might vary from 1 milligram per litre. So in 1 litre of water, there might be 1 milligram, and it might range right up to 23 or 24 milligrams per litre. So it changes. And that has a big, big impact on the carp. So for a carp, it would dictate when they feed, when they rest, and when they're active and when they're sedentary. So if you think about when you had a big meal, you often feel tired, don't you? And the reason you feel tired is because a lot of the oxygen in your blood is being directed to your gut to digest that food. So you feel a bit sleepy because you're not getting the blood pumped up to your brain, so your brain processes are not going at full tilt. Same thing happens with a carp. So when a carp is eating a big meal, it's needing a lot of oxygen to help break down that food. So often you'll see fish feeding in a really good food area within the lake, a feeding area, and then they'll go and sit in a weed bed to digest it. Of course, what does weed do on a summer's day? It photosynthesizes, it's producing lots of oxygen, so it can be a very beneficial place for a fish to sit. It's like being in a jacuzzi with little oxygen bubbles. So that's why they tend to sit up in a weed bed during the daytime. Of course, at night, weed beds respire and they stop photosynthesizing, so they actually take oxygen out of the water. So as you're a fish then, you don't want to sit in a weed bed because actually it's a low oxygen area. So, you know, it's very easy to set up. I've done it myself many times. You find the fish sitting in amongst the weed in the day and you think, oh, I'm going to fish from here. And then at night, they move off. So it plays an important part of their movement around a lake. In terms of natural food, and a good example would be the bloodworm. Bloodworm will regulate their height beneath the silt depending on the amount of oxygen in the water column. So a bloodworm knows, if this is the silt layer and there's the water, a bloodworm knows he doesn't want to get eaten, so he needs to bury nice and deeply into the sediment. Now, as I've said, bloodworm, I've mentioned before many times, bloodworm are a very important part of the carp's diet. Now, the carp obviously know about bloodworm, and bloodworm know that they're going to get eaten if they're not careful, so they try and bury as deep as they can. The depth that a bloodworm can dig into the silt is regulated by the amount of oxygen in the water. So they go as far as they can. Now, at night time, what happens to the oxygen in the water? It tends to drop because algae and plants are sucking it up for respiration. So our poor little bloodworm has to come up to the surface of the silt to get enough oxygen. Of course, when he's near the surface, he's easier to be found. So the carp will tend to feed on bloodworm beds at night. So oxygen plays a really important part to their lives. And as an angler, you can improve your skill and your watercraft a lot by thinking about oxygen. What's the wind doing? What's the rain doing? Where are the weed beds?
So what effect does wind have on oxygen then?
Well, it does a big one, because if you take a static lake, let's say a 1 acre lake, and on a dead still day, the surface is 1 acre. You get a windy day and you get a ripple, of course, that's stretching the surface of the lake, and it may double it. So, of course, each ripple, you've got up and down, up and down, up and down. You're making the surface much bigger, so you're increasing the area for diffusion, so oxygen can diffuse more readily into the water. So often, after a really hot spell, maybe of low oxygen, a windy day can stimulate the fish to feed quite well. Not always, but sometimes. It's something to think about, definitely.